Welcome back to the Fix the Money podcast. I have a very special guest today, Rune Østgård, Norwegian author and attorney, if I'm correct, author of Fraudcoin, 1,000 Years with Inflation as a Policy. Hi, Rune.
Hello, Nico. How are you?
I'm very well. I hope you're good as well.
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for taking your time. Let's play the Did I Pronounce Your Name Correctly game very quickly. Can you please state your name and occupation in Norwegian?
Okay. My name is Rune Østgård, and I'm a lawyer and an author.
And I stumbled upon you in Peter McCormack's podcast. I remember it very vividly. I was in Munich for a Bitcoin conference because that's the only reason to leave town these days. And I went for a run on Theresienwiese where they do the Oktoberfest. And normally I don't run. When I go running, I don't listen to podcasts. But when I'm in the city, I do. And I was very impressed with your book because you really go back, like you say in the title, you go back 1,000 years. But before we start there, let's talk about what's happening right now, because I see many tweets regarding the Norwegian krona. Is that correctly? Is it krona? Are you in trouble up there in the north?
Not me personally, but I think our economy is going through quite some transition. And it's been going on since the financial crisis in 2008. Basically, the Norwegian krona has lost a lot of its value. So we have to pay twice as many US dollars now in order to buy dollars with twice as many kroner in order to buy US dollars, and 50% more in terms of euro, in terms of buying euro. So it's quite some debasement actually, and this devaluation was increasing over the last, let's say, in the period December to June, and then it stopped, and it turned a bit around, so the krona became a little bit more valuable again. I don't follow it very closely these days, so I don't know what the situation is actually now in August.
You stopped following it because when I look at your Twitter feed, it was like krona here, krona there, all day long.
Yes, in June and first part of July, I followed it very closely because many people, they found this quite alarming. So it was something that not only the economists and financial people were discussing, but most people were talking about it. Or many people at least, and also most people were talking about and concerned about the inflation. So these two things, they are very sort of closely knit together. The import prices and the general price level in Norway.
Do I understand correctly that you said that the Norwegian krona had lost like 100% towards another 100% or lost 50% towards the dollar, and since the financial crisis, because normally inflation you measure it against houses, stocks, Bitcoin, maybe gold, but if you already lose that much against the dollar, that's really a problem.
Yeah, definitely. I think we could get $1 for a little bit more than 5 Norwegian kroner in April in 2008, and in May, June this year, we had to pay, I think it was 10.5 Norwegian kroner to get $1, so twice as much basically. And compared with the euro, we had to pay some 50% more in that period.
So what brings you to the topic of inflation? Was it this experience? Because you wrote your book before the onslaught of the inflation that we are seeing right now, right? That was not what motivated it. So it needed to come from somewhere else.
Okay, so the book takes as a starting point that people really need to understand what inflation is and the basic fact that it is a policy. And I understood already in 2008 during the financial crisis that I need to try to convey this understanding, this knowledge to others. So I wrote an op-ed for a regional newspaper in November. It was published just I think 4 days or something after the white paper was published. And then when the price inflation started to rear its ugly head in the spring of 2022, I thought that what about writing a sort of a pamphlet, like those small handouts that people used to distribute on the street corners some 100 years ago when they had a message they want to convey to people about politics or something like that. So just to expand a little bit about on the op-ed and write a few pages where I explain this in a little bit more detail. And then what happened was that I submitted a draft to Goldbug in Oslo because I read something that he had had written on the internet, which I found interesting, and I asked him, "Is this something you like?" And he wrote back to me. He actually called back to me and said that this is going to be the most important book in Norway for decades, for several decades. So you have to do this as a book and publish it. So I wrote the book in 3 months last summer and beginning of fall last year.
And are you writing a new book right now? Is that the reason you're not following the inflation anymore?
Well, I still follow the inflation, but not so much the how the Norwegian krone develops. And yes, that's correct. I'm writing a new book. It's going to be titled Arrow of Truth. And this book is about Bitcoin. So while Fraudcoin, my previous book, is about inflation. So the subtitle is 1,000 Years with Inflation as a Policy. So the next book is more specifically about Bitcoin.
Okay, so before we dive into the whole inflation as a policy and the history, which is extremely important, and of course, we know this from Austrian economists, specifically Mises talked a lot about inflation being a policy. He did not go back to 1,000 years. He did not go back to the Vikings like you did. But I wonder, what is it that you expect to happen next? So what is it that you expect to happen within the next, let's say, 5 years on the money front? What are the things in that go through your mind? I know that we don't want to talk about the future too much because the future is always uncertain. But what are you looking for?
So I don't know more about the future than you or anybody else. So this is just my trying to peek into the, what do you call it, the glass bowl.
Yes,
glass
or
bowl.
yes, and we in German we say Kaffeesud lesen, which basically means you read the coffee, right?
Coffee leaves, yes.
Yeah.
Or the coffee. Yeah, no, I think that Bitcoin is going to do very well, and national currencies will struggle quite a lot in the next few years, and the situation is a bit chaotic. Um, what I think is that Bitcoin probably is going to establish itself as the number one money type within 10-15 years or something like that. That's my best guess. And I think that the transition is going to be more I don't think we are going to see hyperinflation in the Western countries, but that it's going to be more of a gradual development over time. The reason why I think this is because the inflation policy, and especially the US dollar and today's monetary system, that's a very heavy ship. You are not able to steer it suddenly in any direction. It sort of moves forward. It's tough to put the brakes on and make it stop. But now when we have Bitcoin, and from before we have gold, and we have a variety of currencies. The BRICS countries are trying to get a little bit away from the dollar dominance. So I think the total picture it creates a lot more of dynamics than many people think of. And these dynamics might actually help us a little bit, I think, instead of sort of forcing us into a hyperinflation scenario.
You mean we won't have hyperinflation because there is alternatives? Because Bitcoin exists? Is that
Yeah.
something? Why? Because is the thinking that people would just flee because then you would have hyperinflation, or is it that Bitcoin forces governments to be more responsible?
Exactly. So since we have this new escape hatch, Bitcoin, they have to behave more responsible, because if they don't, people will flee in droves and accumulate Bitcoin, and then that will be a dramatic situation for the national currencies.
But do we know? I mean, if Bitcoin didn't exist, from your analysis of inflation, right? We've been through these inflationary cycles many times. So where do we forget Bitcoin for a second? Where do we stand today? Because in 2008, I am. How old are you, if I may ask?
I'm 50.
You're 50, so I'm 40, so I'm old enough to remember. Because the thing is, when I talk to like 25-year-olds at university and I talk about the financial crisis like it was yesterday, they were in school, you know, and they don't care. But I remember in 2008, I was very worried about inflation, but it did not arrive, not in the form that we expected. Now it arrived, and I see many things basically in my daily lives. You know, I just went to the supermarket and I looked at the people, and I could see that people are looking for, you know, cheaper stuff, and the prices are absolutely insane by now. I mean, it's you basically it doesn't matter if you go to the supermarket or if you go to the restaurant, you always pay 20 euros for lunch, right? And so my question is, without Bitcoin, what would happen? What would be the next steps in the inflationary cycle?
I think that the next step would be quite a lot of deleveraging, and that's going to happen anyway now, many places, I think. And
Deleveraging.
I think deleveraging, yes. And so you would in that scenario also have a recession in many countries, and sort of the economy will then flush out a lot of the bad debt, and then it would pick up again with stimulative packages and more inflation, more monetary inflation. That's what I think would have happened. But now I think that that's going to happen anyway now with Bitcoin. But I think that the governments, they won't have the same degree of flexibility. They have to act somewhat a little bit more responsible. they can't print that much money now when people can escape to Bitcoin.
But deleveraging would be part of being a little bit responsible, right? That would be, because one of the ways you can be responsible, quote unquote, in the fiat system is to have higher rates earlier and to let the market do its thing, and that's what they are at least trying to do right now.
Yeah, that's correct. That's what they are trying to do now, and that's also what I assume that they would have done without Bitcoin in the picture. So my point is just that the flexibility they have when there isn't any escape hatch, such as Bitcoin or gold, the flexibility is a little bit greater, so they can do a little bit more than more money printing. But now they have to be more careful, because more and more people will understand that we have this escape hatch. We just have to learn how to use it, and the central banks will have to behave a little bit more, responsibly.
I have this thought in my head from, have you seen, I think it was 2 years ago, it was Jack Dorsey on in Miami, and he said, Bitcoin changes everything. And it's, on the one hand, it's interesting and great to be part of it, and on the other hand, it's a bit scary. It's the thought, right? We could miss something. I mean, how does Bitcoin change everything? And because if there is a new money in town and that really influences governments and central banks, that is the changing of everything. I mean, we can basically throw 100 years of literature, economic literature, out of the window.
Yes, we should already do that, shouldn't we? So, I think that when you have a debt-based economy like we have now, it's an inflation policy. We have strong incentives to leverage up, both the consumers and the businesses, borrow money, get the first new money as early as possible. So you get so much debt in the system, and so much of the investments are financed by borrowing. And if you have a type of money which isn't possible to inflate, like Bitcoin, it has a set inflation schedule, and it will disappear totally in 2140, then you will have a transition towards people and businesses using savings instead when they invest. And people won't be incentivized to borrow as much money. So I think the economic system will be totally different. And since the economic system with the monetary system as sort of the most important layer in the economy, when all of that changes so dramatically, one must expect that you get similar level and many types of changes throughout society. So it will be very different, but it will be probably much better. And since my take is that this is going to take some time. It's not going to happen suddenly. That's my view. That's my belief. Then I'm not so scared I'm not so scared of what can happen. And the question is really, the most important question is, if we didn't have Bitcoin, wouldn't that be much more scary?
Yes, I can give you that answer. I mean, we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know, right? And we wouldn't even be talking right now, probably. I was talking about these things before I was talking about Bitcoin. Not necessarily before Bitcoin existed, but before I took it seriously. And I can tell you that the debate on inflation as a policy, specifically, it's non-existent. It's basically a couple of older gold bugs complaining about that nobody wants to listen to them. Economists are, well, I basically brainwashed by this by the machine, and I knew this also before I even got into Bitcoin, because I never understood why economists would never think about money. They always, for them, money was always something that started in a central bank, and what came before nobody cared about. And I always thought that was weird. But the central bank model is also extremely resilient and extremely successful in its own way. I mean, we had a central bank in the Soviet Union and the central bank in the so-called capitalist US at the same time. It's the only thing that everybody in the world can agree on, basically, besides maybe El Salvador, who don't have their own currency. But for me, it's the idea that we could be onto something with this Bitcoin thing. Yes, I'm totally with you that the idea of turning it 180 degrees on its head is amazing, but for me it's still scary. It's really scary.
Yeah, for me, it's quite a simpler psychological exercise, because I don't know, you said that you have several children, two or
I have two kids, yeah.
Two kids, yes. And I have one daughter. And my take is that her future would look scary without Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Sort of, it's as simple as that. But with Bitcoin, it's less scary. It will be a transition phase, but still it provides some opportunities for her that she wouldn't have without it.
Do you think that, because I can tell you, for me, I am this person, right? I don't mind, I'm not like 100,000% low time preference, because I'm also older. I think it's very much an age thing, right? But I'm also a saver. I've never had a euro of debt in my life. I didn't buy an apartment. I don't lease a car. The idea of taking on debt is just totally alien to me, right? So that's why I think I get Bitcoin and I get gold, because they are equity based. So is this really what you're saying? Do you really think that we're going from a debt based inflationary society basically to an equity based deflationary society? Is there any example in history? Has this ever happened before? Have we ever, or is there an approximation, like the gold standard or something like that?
Yes, during the 19th century, the price levels in Europe were largely flat, and then we had the gold standard most places. And in some parts of that period, and in some geographical areas in some countries, the prices actually went down, so you had price deflation. And also in the United States, you had price deflation, sound price deflation, due to the monetary system that they had there. But not only that, also probably because they had a large influx of people moving to the United States, and sort of they built it a little bit more from the ground and up, very quickly over there. So there were many deflationary forces in the United States. And if you go further back, you can go to the 16th century in the Netherlands, after the revolution, when the Dutch people freed themselves from, I think the last ruler was the Spanish king. And
It was the Habsburgs. It was us.
Oh, was it? Okay,
Yes,
I think
it was the
yeah,
Spanish. Yes, the Spanish king, but he was a Habsburg.
yeah,
Yeah.
correct. And the Habsburgs, I write a little bit about it in my book. They were using inflation to a great degree, and it was created many difficulties for the people. And the Dutch, once they managed to free themselves in the revolution, they decided quite quickly that they wanted to abolish the inflation system. So they introduced what we used to have in my country before 1050 after Christ, and that was a system of monetary freedom. So people were free to use any kind of money that they would like, and they liked best the money with a high content of gold or silver, and they used coins from the Arab countries, and also from many places throughout Europe. And so this was what the Dutch did in the middle of the 16th century. And what happened then was that they had a large influx of gold and silver coins from other parts of Europe, because most of the places, the kings and the emperors, they had inflation as a policy. So people's money became less valuable in those countries because they had to go to the mint, to the royal mint, and hand over some silver or gold and get coins in exchange for that. And then the coins had less silver or gold in total than what they gave to the mint. So it was a sort of a silver taxation and gold taxation. So it was better for them to take the money to the Netherlands, where they had a more liberal system. And the Dutch established Amsterdam Bank, which was a very successful business. And they also established a mint, and people could give their gold and silver to the mint and have their valuable metals standardized. And they didn't pay much for the coinage. It was a small fee that only covered the cost of the mint. So it wasn't a profit motive by the rulers in the Netherlands.
No, they understood that in order to facilitate trade, even if you have monetary freedom, one part that the government has always plays is basically defining, what's what, and then of course protecting property rights, because that is something that I think that many Bitcoiners might be overlooking when they talk about separating money from state. Yes, you do separate money from state. You can probably not separate capital from state. In so far as the government has to, somehow basically, let's call like whitelist your assets, right? That's why I think we're going to have a wild ride with Bitcoin. But also that the whole BlackRock thing is now very interesting, because they are legitimizing not only Bitcoin from a PR standpoint, but also from they're turning Bitcoin into capital, because you can just buy it with BlackRock, and everything else, like on the law side, is covered. But the Bank of Amsterdam, that's kind of ironic, because that was the precursor to the Swedish Riksbank, which was the first central bank. So it all comes full circle, right? And also, by the way, it is only a little thing, but because we talked about the Habsburgs, today, what's left of the Habsburgs, they are very much into Austrian economics and very much into hard money today.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that.
They don't have much influence anymore, but sometimes they talk. And Karl Habsburg, who would be the emperor today if the monarchy still existed, he talks about Mises and Hayek, and it happens, but not very not very publicly. But I think this idea of monetary freedom is so interesting because there's no reason, especially in a digitalized world, why we should be forced to use a specific money, right? Do you think that something that like we saw in Amsterdam could be happening in places like El Salvador in the long run? I know it never happens straight away, but in the long run.
So in El Salvador, they made the strategic decision to implement Bitcoin as legal tender in addition to the US dollars. I can't say that it was a wrong decision. I would have preferred that they said that people could be free to use whatever money they would like. It might be that it would have been difficult for the administration over there to handle a situation where you have monetary freedom in terms of how to collect taxes, etc. It might be easier in other countries which are more, in quote marks, developed, more advanced. I don't know. But the effect of saying that a Bitcoin is legal tender can be quite big in the longer term. It can have an effect on other countries as well. I do understand that there are some legal issues related to that, because if for instance I own legal tender coins, which are created by the US Mint or something like that, or in the UK or in Australia, if I buy such a coin and sell it, I don't have to pay capital gains tax on that. And that's because it's legal tender coins. And I see that there is a discussion on, since now El Salvador has said that Bitcoin is legal tender, will it also be the same with regard to Bitcoin as it currently is with foreign coins? I think that few countries have probably reflected upon that when they designed the rules in the tax code with reference to foreign legal tender. So that might have been part of the reasoning when they introduced Bitcoin as legal tender in El Salvador. I don't know. I haven't talked to them about it. But it would be interesting to hear what they think about it, if it may have an impact in terms of regulation and implementation of Bitcoin in other countries. I don't know.
I think it might. I know from Austria that they are thinking about this, especially from the tax perspective, but I don't know if anything specific will come of it. The government can also say, no, we don't care. We don't care that it's legal tender over there. What are you gonna do? We don't care.
That's the freedom you have as a politician. It's very simple like that.
Exactly. What's the status of Bitcoin in Norway?
Okay, I think that we don't have exact statistics on the Bitcoin adoption, but if we look at the numbers for cryptocurrency adoption, including Bitcoin, we are a little bit below the global average. There is a little bit of Bitcoin mining in Norway, and the last report I saw said that 3% of the hash rate is produced in Norway. So we have a lot of hydropower in Norway, and especially up north in the northern half of Norway. It's very cheap energy, cheap electricity. So we have quite a few miners up there, but it's early.
Okay. But you should have, I mean, you have hydro and the oil, maybe the oil just gets exported, right?
Yeah.
But but wasn't the CT thing from Norway, Aker and Kjell Inge Rokke, he's Norwegian, right?
Yes, he's still Norwegian, but he moved to Switzerland last year.
But did anything materialize with that, or do you know anything about that?
I think that they bought quite a lot of Bitcoin before the peak, before the bear market.
Okay.
And so we haven't heard so much about it after the price, the Bitcoin price fell. But from what I understand is that they still own quite a lot of Bitcoin. I don't think they have sold anything. And from what I hear, Kjell Inge Røkke, who is one of the richest men from Norway, he's quite into this sort of from an intellectual and philosophical point of view. He understands this very well, they say, and he's also, of course, a very smart guy. So that's quite good, I think, in terms of having someone who could lead the way, so to speak, and perhaps be an inspiration to others, typically investors, the financial market, moving forward. But I don't think that very much will happen before the Bitcoin price moves up again. Then they, of course, will be more interested again in terms of making investments in Bitcoin.
Are people interested in Bitcoin as an alternative, like as an investment because of the inflation, or is it I don't know. I'm looking for anecdotal evidence, basically.
Okay, so I'm not very much in direct contact with the financial market players and investors. But Norway is, I would say, quite conservative, and it's a trust-based society, has always been that. And people have placed a lot of trust in our politicians and sort of the civil servants, bureaucrats, And there's been quite a lot of gaslighting with regard to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies from that part of the society. So the industry and the financial sector, they are quite hesitant. That's my impression, at least. And they are sort of sitting on the fence. I don't know if you have that expression in English or in German, but
Yes.
they're sort of watching the situation. From what I hear, people have become much more concerned the last few months due to the high price inflation and the uncertainty for the markets due to the problems that the Norwegian krone has had. The foreign exchange markets plays with it quite violently, and that creates quite a challenge for manufacturing and service industry as well, insofar as they rely on imports. So it's difficult for them to plan. And from what I hear, people are becoming more open to the idea of looking into Bitcoin and trying to understand more about it. And of course, that's also a bit the idea of writing a book now about Bitcoin. We think that now that the Fraudcoin book, my previous book, has got quite well known and quite well received in Norway. So people have been used to talk about monetary policy and inflation. It's more broadly being talked about in the Norwegian society. So they are now more receptive, I think, to the idea of diving into what Bitcoin is. So the timing of my previous book was quite good. And also I think that the timing of the next book will be perfect, because people are being more open now, and due to the problems with the economy and the inflation. I don't know how it is in Austria. What's your sort of feeling of the situation there today?
Well, I mean, first of all, I wanted to ask you, so do you write the books specifically for the Norwegian people first, is that correct?
Actually, my current book project about Bitcoin is written in English.
Mm-hmm.
So the market that we think is the biggest and most important market for both of the books is the English-speaking world, but also Fraudcoin is being translated now into German. So we think that these books will meet a global demand for information about inflation and Bitcoin.
I agree. I mean, Bitcoin books there are many Bitcoin books. You asked me, so I'm a journalist. I've been writing all my life, so I have a problem with writing now. I don't want to write. It feels too much like work. So I switch to videos and podcasts and stuff. I know I should be writing a book, but I still can't get myself to it. And with the people, I think that if we're honest, the price and the speculation part is still much more important than the logical I save my money in Bitcoin idea. And that's how most people got into Bitcoin in the first place. And it's also, I mean, I don't have to tell you this because you have studied inflation. It's also a higher risk-taking ability is also a direct consequence of inflation, right? If inflation was ruining the money, Bitcoin wouldn't even exist, let alone be bought by people, because they say, why should I do that? I still have good money at the bank, right? But I don't think that, any mass of people is gonna go into Bitcoin in order to save themselves. It's always gonna be a little, like a small avant-garde of people, and the rest is just gonna be there because the price goes up. And they think that they can make money. And yes, they might think they run away from inflation, but they still think in euro terms. While I think that one of the most important developments of Bitcoin is basically using it as a money in the cyber economy. And the cyber economy is probably still in its absolute infancy. I think that we see Google and we see YouTube, and we see, now we talk here and I have a camera and a screen, and we think this is it, but it's probably not. It's probably just the start. So I'm very interested in what kind of business models will Bitcoin enable that aren't even enabled with fiat money at all, especially in the internet. So I want to see that, and then I'd like to see more people actually use Bitcoin besides speculation and saving. I know that both are fine. I'm just saying it's easier for many people who are like very early in Bitcoin, are people who actually used it as money 10 years ago because they needed to pay somebody in Australia or in the US, and they still stick around because they know it works. Yeah.
Yeah. My idea is that if we could facilitate a little bit faster transition, faster adoption of Bitcoin, that would be good.
Yeah.
And so the question I asked myself when I wrote the first book on inflation was, who should I write it for? Who should I sort of address? And I was convinced that I needed to address the average reader at the same time as I had to bring something to the table also for the economists who are curious about the origins of money and monetary policy. So everybody should gain something from reading it. And my hope was that I would be able to get across to call it not necessarily the average person, but perhaps those people who are able to lead others and to be idols, so to speak, natural leaders, intelligent, good, warm people who wants to live good lives for themselves and their own family, and also to set a positive example to others.
Mm-hmm.
Because they might inspire the broader masses and at least many other people to follow and pick up the interest for money as a topic and the understanding of inflation. And perhaps they would be able to lift up the debate and make it sort of a natural thing to discuss. Our money, the future of our money, that is important and natural for everybody to discuss this. So when I write the book about Bitcoin now, I know from experience and my understanding of the Bitcoin space now that there are very many services and very many books and articles that are sort of inward directed. They are directed towards the Bitcoin community.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it looks like it's being produced a whole lot of content and services and goods in order to cater, in order to meet the demand of Bitcoiners, people who have already been orange pilled. My feeling, and I don't have any evidence for this, but my feeling is that the supply of these services, this content, is very high. At the same time as people don't look too much towards the others, the no-coiners, or people who don't know anything about coins at all. So when I write the Bitcoin book, I want to use that as a project where we can onboard people who are not, who doesn't know anything about Bitcoin at all. So it should be a sort of a beginner, not a beginner's book, but sort of a bridge from total ignorance, but some degree of interest for the project, for this topic, because it's being talked about. You want to learn a little bit about it, and also enable them to understand that this is not only serious. This is also a good project. It's a humanitarian project. It's good for society. It's good for our children that we have Bitcoin as an opportunity. So my book aims a lot more on ordinary at the market where you have the ordinary people, people interested in politics, economics, history, etc., more than the Bitcoiners. Because you and me and all the other Bitcoiners, we have more than enough stuff which has been written and produced for us. That's my impression. Not to say that we should stop making services and stuff for the Bitcoin community. I think that's important, but it's quite a lot that's being produced these days, both in terms of podcasts and YouTube channels, educational stuff, cold storage wallets, software, discussion groups,
Mm-hmm.
everything. You can sit 24/7 and read something new or something that you have read many times before, but it's presented in a new channel. So I try to look outside that box, so to speak, and try to create a bridge for the others to join us.
I think you might be right, and I think it's very important that you do that. I think it's very hard for many people who get into what we call the Bitcoin rabbit hole. You know, after a while, you start speaking in a different tongue. You get overly excited. There's a phase where you think you understand the whole world, and you get mad at anybody who doesn't understand it, and then it gets better again. But what I want to say is that I think it's hard. I did actually in my German podcast, so I'm doing my main podcast is my German podcast. And again, the first episode, I wanted to do a beginner's episode for like introduce Bitcoin to people with somebody who's doing a YouTube channel aimed at beginners. And we started the interview, and I can tell you after 10 minutes, we already talked about stuff that beginners would never understand. So it's what I'm saying, it's very hard to always pull yourself back and look at the world through fiat eyes, basically. And that's the one thing I would say. And the second thing, I agree that there is a lot, but there's a reason. And the reason is not only that people like Bitcoin so much, but the reason is that Bitcoin changes everything. And when Bitcoin changes everything,
I totally agree.
You change your perspective, right? And if you change your perspective, you have to look at everything anew. And that's why there's so many things to talk about in Bitcoin and with Bitcoiners that it never gets boring. I mean, I do like 3 episodes a week now, 1 in English, 2 in German, and there's still, I still don't, I feel like I'm scratching the surface.
I totally agree. And I guess I'm still a little bit, what you say, colored, we say in Norwegian, or that we are... I remember how it was to meet the Bitcoin community last fall when I was in the sort of final phase of writing my Fraudcoin book. And what I saw quite a lot was that people said you have to study Bitcoin for thousands of hours before you understand it. You have to read so much, you have to discuss it with others, and still sort of you have to prepare yourself and get ready for it before you can become a Bitcoiner and sort of be confident being a Bitcoiner and buying Bitcoin, etc. And to me, it felt a little bit exclusionary. That sort of it excluded others unless you were willing to put down the work, put down the hours. Then you couldn't become a real Bitcoiner, or you wouldn't be able to understand this. So that was actually why I think it was in December or something like that, I decided to write my next book on Bitcoin, because I wanted to condense a lot of the knowledge and make it accessible for people. So if they read first the Fraudcoin book and the Bitcoin book afterwards, they should be able at least to decide if they want to buy some or earn some Bitcoin.
You know
Bitcoin.
You know who you remind me of?
No?
Jeff Booth.
Okay.
Because his book was actually not about Bitcoin, and then he got like into Bitcoin at like the end of researching, and then it slid in there a little bit, and then he started doing podcasts only talking about Bitcoin, and now he doesn't have time to write a book about Bitcoin.
Yes.
But it's a lot like that, huh?
Yeah, several people have said that to me, and I've also, of course, read The Price of Tomorrow, Jeff's book. It's a very good book, and I understand quite well where he comes from. So the question is how to onboard others, how to make this an interesting journey for others, something that they want to look into, and to make them understand that this is not a frightening concept. This is something which is interesting and promising, and it's funny, and you meet so many intelligent people. That's perhaps the most amazing thing about it. Not only intelligent and intellectuals, but also you know good people with a big heart and who wants to do good things for themselves and for society, for civilization. You know, it's so the culture is so valuable. The society, the Bitcoin society, and I want people to have an sort of easy access to this community instead of being told as I was, or the first much of what I read in the beginning was you need to study Bitcoin for hours and hours before you can understand it. That was something which excluded me a little bit. It provoked me a little bit. Okay, then I'm going to learn this much quicker was my idea. And of course, with my background, my understanding of Austrian economics and monetary stuff, then it was easier also to understand the most generic things about Bitcoin, of course.
I really understand what you mean. I really do, and I hope that your book will be a big success. When are you gonna you plan on launching it, like in the bull market of 2024 to sell as many books as possible?
Originally, we planned to launch it in May this year, but we postponed it to most likely in October.
This year?
This year, yes.
Oh, that's very soon.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I look forward to reading it. I think that the concept of the monetary freedom is extremely important. I think that's the one thing that you can get people intellectually behind, even if they're not convinced about Bitcoin. And then the fact that, like you said, the fact that Bitcoiners are very relaxed and seem to be having fun and are optimistic about the world, I think that that's like almost enough these days, because people are so frustrated and they don't know what to do and where to go, and you can really see it. It's especially with the inflation. I am on normie television every week, and they ask me about economics, and of course I didn't expect this, but I started and the inflation immediately came, and so I talk about inflation every week, right? And they always ask me, what is the government supposed to do? You know, what are the government, what are the politicians supposed to do? And I always say, I don't know. I mean, what is nothing? They can't do anything. We can quit the euro if you want, but that's not what you want to hear, right? So what are we going to do? You know, I can't say, you know, adopt the Bitcoin standard. We're not there yet. You have to do it slowly. But it's so, that's why I said inflation as a policy seems to be something that can rarely be stopped. Would that be correct?
In the beginning of our talk today, just to reflect a little bit on the monetary freedom subject, because you said that economists, they sort of take the central banks and central bank policies, monetary policy as a given. The money comes from, sort of originates with the central banks and the banking system. It's given. You can't do anything about that, and then you don't need sort of to understand the history of money, etc. And that's sort of the reality that most people also live in, not only economists, but they feel that this is the natural state, you know, with government created money or government monopolized money and bank money. This is sort of the natural state. This is our history. We don't need to look further back to see what was going on then. It's almost not part of our culture or our history anymore, because nobody talks about it.
Exactly.
So people feel that inflation is natural, you know, it's natural. And they also say it's good. It's good for the economy, and also then hence good for society. Okay, no, you're not supposed to question that. When I say that there is a concept called monetary freedom, and that used to be the normal situation in Norway some 1,000 years ago, and then it probably had been like that forever, since people began to use a variety of types of money, from herds to hides, to shells or pearls or whatever they used, and then coins or the weight of silver in terms of jewelry and gold jewelry, etc. So for most of the period that we have had a civilization, that's almost 5,000 years now since the first civilization started. Probably we have had monetary freedom in most parts of the world in most of that period. And then inflation as a policy started perhaps 2,500 years ago. That's the first sort of proven, well, it's actually not proven totally, but they say that in Athens, the Greek city-state of Athens, they started with this as a project some 450 years before Christ. Okay, if it started then, what was the norm before then in Athens and throughout the world was most likely monetary freedom. So monetary freedom, the right to use whatever money that you like best, is what we have had for the most time when we have had civilizations in this world. So that's the natural state. And gradually we got inflation policy and monetary policy, perhaps beginning in Athens 2,500 years ago. And gradually it crept all over the world, and it came to Norway in 1050. But that's sort of the political state. It hasn't always been like that. And also when for instance, the Dutch reintroduced it in the 16th century, they knew about this tradition from the Dutch colonies, the Dutch what do you call it? Indian colonies?
The East Indies.
East Indies, yes, which they took over, I think, from the Portuguese. And the Portuguese had a part, I think it was in Murcia? No, that's in Spain. A part of Portugal, they had monetary freedom in, I think it was in the 7th or the 8th century after Christ. So this is very much part of our heritage. And I think,
interesting.
Yes, it's very important to sort of embrace it. This is what we developed naturally, what we had naturally as a society, as individuals. We could use the money we liked best. It should be possible to sort of scale that back again, slowly or suddenly at some moment, remove the inflation policy and get back to what's natural for us as a civilization. And also, just to finalize my rant here now, as I'm going here, I think that it's important to understand that civilization is very much a concept that develops naturally, but it's a reflection of what we are as humans. We are special compared to the other species. And what is it that is so very special about us as humans? Well, first of all, we learn from each other very efficiently, very effectively. So we copy each other's behavior, bad behavior and good behavior. And we are mainly positive. We mainly want to be good with each other. We want to treat each other with respect. That's sort of, although we have this, what you call it, the ability to also, be violently, act violently, and be bad with others. Well.
No, but I think it's important. I'm sorry that I interrupt you, but it's important because I see this with Bitcoiners, but with people in general. People are good. And yes, incentives turn them into monsters, and one of the incentives can be fiat money. But in general, I don't think that people, are bad. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
I'm glad you agree with me on that, because I feel that today many are really in doubt of is the human race a good force on this earth? We destroy the nature and the climate, etc. it's we who should be eradicated or something like that. That's sort of the idea. Man is bad, you know. But I think you couldn't have developed a civilization without people being a sort of good-natured, or that we want to be good with each other and cooperate and learn from each other. But sort of that's also part of our belief system, and the belief system is sort of the base layer, the very foundation of society, of civilization. And the next layer, the first layer, if you say that belief system is sort of layer 0, then the first layer for developing a civilization, that's money and the monetary system. You can't build capital and make investments without money. It's impossible to calculate. You will just have a sort of a rudimentary, very basic society if you don't have any money. So it was the use of money in a society with monetary freedom that enabled us to build a well-functioning civilization. And then at some point in time, somewhere, someone got the idea that they wanted to monopolize money and make politics out of it. But the natural state, which is just as natural as everything else with us as humans, it's to make use of the money that we like best. That's the natural state. It's an expression of us as human beings.
That means that we really go into the almost metaphysical here. We don't even know what parts of our experience Bitcoin is able to unlock. We can only, peek behind the curtain, and maybe that's one of the reasons why Bitcoiners love to stay with other Bitcoiners, is because they already have done this. They've already started doing this. But I'm glad if your book can explain this to many people. And of course, I did ask you about your age because I do think it's important to have a wide spectrum of ages as well, because somebody who is your age is not going to listen to a 20-year-old YouTuber. It doesn't, he might be listening to you, but not to the 20-year-old YouTuber. You need to have people talking in different languages to different people. And I think this is very important. So, Rune, thank you very much. I think we could go on for a very long time here, but it's already more than an hour. And I think rather than prolonging this, we should just do a second episode maybe when your book is out. It's coming in October. Please, where can we find your first book? Where can we find your second book? Where can we find you to give us the outro, so to say?
So the first book is already on Amazon, and if you want to follow me and interact with me, just follow me on Twitter, or X as it's called these days. I'm quite active there, and it's a big Bitcoin community there as well, as most of your viewers know. And of course, I'm also getting used to the Nostr platform, or protocol as they call it. So you find me there as well. So, but okay. Begin with X. That would be a great thing. And yes, I would very much love to come back and talk more with you. It's been very interesting.
It's very, very interesting. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your books, for taking the time. Of course, we'll put your Twitter profile and your X profile and your Nostr public key. We'll put all of those in the show notes. And I hope that you can help, educating people about inflation as a policy. We didn't even talk too much about that today, but it's in the book. So buy the book, then you can read all about it. Thank you, Rune.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you. Goodbye.